Hey everyone, Joshua Laycock here. Day 27. Sorry if I have to be a little quieter than usual tonight. Of course, it is the start of our family vacation holidays over the Christmas break, so naturally people are getting sick. So my daughter's asleep, fighting off a bit of a fever, and I think my son is a little under the weather as well. So we'll see how tonight goes, and hopefully no interruptions. I wanted to thank Super Steve Runs, a buddy of mine, who a couple days ago I asked, "What do you want to hear about? What do you want me to riff on?" Not like I have all the answers, but sometimes it's fun to explore the questions. And he asked that I speak about ways to remain humble and not arrogant. Well, that one was it's an interesting question for me because for reasons that we'll talk about, I think that I was massively arrogant for a good chunk of my life. But me being a definition guy, what does arrogant mean? And I think it means a little bit different to a lot of different people. But really what I think it means is when you have an overinflated sense of self-importance, of your own abilities, you think that you're better than you are, or more important than you are. And I do think that arrogance is an important thing to be aware of, because I do think that it can cause a lot of trouble. It feeds ego, which is never good. And this idea that we're more valuable than we are, I think, not only is it a pretty big put off to other people, I think it puts us in a bit of a precarious state. So being aware of being arrogant, it takes a good amount of self-awareness and self-reflection, and probably having some good people around you, to be completely honest with you. Chances are good, if you are finding yourself, or people are telling you that you're being arrogant, I think if you're anything like me, it probably comes from a place of deep insecurity. It comes from a place of feeling the need to posture, of not being prepared to accept that you don't know everything, that you don't have all the answers, that if you were to cease to exist tomorrow, the world would come to an end. And of course, that just isn't the case. Doesn't mean that it wouldn't be bad. It doesn't mean that people wouldn't miss you, or that people's lives wouldn't be changed. But the world will move on without you tomorrow. It's just, the reality of it all. So for me, this concept of arrogance, I think more often than not, with time, with experience, with time down range, as I say, in the mix, if you're looking at it professionally, even as a spouse, as a father, I think there is an opportunity to become arrogant. But I would think and I would hope that with time and with experience, and because I think with experience, you actually end up starting to realize how little you know. And I think I've talked about this before, is ironically, the more aware of my limitations and of my own sort of universal irrelevance, the more I recognize how little I know, the wiser I become. The more open to answers, the more open to creative solutions. And with that, I think, comes a washing away of arrogance. I don't believe that you can have a hyperinflated sense of self-worth and of self-importance if you recognize and genuinely believe how insignificant we are in the world. Now, I'm not insignificant to my kids, and I'm not insignificant to my spouse, and I'm not insignificant to my parents. But beyond that, let's be real. Aside from some time of grief, everyone's lives will move on more or less uninterrupted. And even them, even my kids and my wife and my mom and my dad, they will move on. And if you recognize that and you realize that with humility, then it's tough to be arrogant. The other thing, particularly if you start to enjoy some success in your life, which I hope that everyone has on some level, it's important to recognize, not in a bit of a nihilistic or morbid sort of way, but it's important to recognize that all those things that you have, those successes, can be taken away from you by fate or whatever you want to call that. I could lose my job tomorrow. Like something could happen where I'm no longer able to be as active or fit as I like to be. I could have a brain injury. I could, someone could give me a knock and I won't be able to do these videos or function on a level that I'm accustomed to functioning on. So even if you are an alpha, even if you are top of the pile, massively successful by all measures, I think the truth is all of that can be taken away in a heartbeat. And that's where I think some humility comes into play, is that everything is temporary. And it depends on what you believe. But for me, especially now, on the eve of a birthday, not a significant birthday, but, another birthday, I realize that it's all fleeting, and that to be overly proud of my accomplishments, that's not the right word, to be arrogant, to have an overinflated sense of my own worth, is tempting the fates. It's tempting the gods or whoever that you believe in to take it away. So for me, humility comes with recognizing my own limitations, and by extension, recognizing how much potential that I have in me, and to not tempt fate, because everything can be taken away in a heartbeat. But I want to speak quickly to the other side of that coin. And I would like to give a little example. A couple days ago, I guess last night, my wife Kate made an incredible meal. I mean, she's a really good cook in general, but she just knocked it out of the park. Prime rib, beautiful potatoes, sugar snap peas. She made homemade buns that were just, gravy, horseradish sauce, the whole jive. I don't know what possessed her, but man, was it good. Even our kids, who have been a little bit picky lately with food, were wolfing it. And even tonight, my son asked for leftovers of last night. It was an amazing meal. And she had every reason to be proud of what she had done. Yet it was hard for her to accept that she was feeling proud of the job that she had done, of the work that she had done, and of the meal that she had provided for our family. And it's important that we not become too humble, because then I think we start to undervalue our personal sense of worth and our own importance, particularly to those who are around us, to those who matter to us. And I think it's okay to be proud of our accomplishments. I think it's okay to look back on a job well done and feel good about that, and to tell yourself that you feel good about that. And maybe even to tell some other people that you feel good about that. We got to count our wins. We're pretty good at talking about learning from our failures and failing fast, failing forward, doing an after action review and finding out what we could have done differently. And that's good. It's important. But life is also going to be made up of wins. And we should own them, and we should be proud of them. And yes, we want to learn from them. But allow yourself to feel good about it. Now, if she had had one killer meal, and trust me, she's had way more than one killer meal, but if last night, let's say she was strutting around thinking she was the best chef on the planet, well, that's arrogance, but that's not her. But I do think that as a society, because we live in these extremes again, right? We've got these people who have one little small win and all of a sudden they're a superstar. But then the opposite end is we can't allow ourselves to enjoy any of our wins. We can't allow ourselves to say, you know what, I'm pretty damn good at this. I'm pretty good at that. And that's a shame. Because, you know, what the hell's the point of trying things if we can't enjoy the victories? This is something that I talk to people a lot about, is it's important that no matter what you do, you take personal responsibility for it. So let's take the dinner analogy. If Kate had not taken the initiative to try something new, or let's say she, for argument's sake, needed someone to hold her hand through it. She hired a chef to come in and walk her through the meal. If the meal had been a flop, if it hadn't been very good, it would be too easy to say, well, that was that person's fault. They didn't help me enough. They didn't do that correctly. But inversely, if it had been a stellar knock it out of the park kind of a meal, it'd be hard to own that victory and to feel that pride and to build off of that. And that's why, as a coach, right, our job is not to give answers to people. It's to help them come up with their own solutions. That way you own the failures and you learn from them, as opposed to having a mechanism to hand it off to someone. But more importantly, I tell people, it's so that you can also own your victories, and that you can allow those victories, that action, the courage to do something, it allows you not only that opportunity, but it also allows you to develop the experience and to come up with the confidence. So, Steve, I hope that kind of answers your question. And I think it requires being aware of who you are. I think we're all probably a little arrogant from time to time. We're probably also a little overly humble. And for those of you who know me, I often talk about live in the gray and avoid the extremes. Don't be massively arrogant, but I would also say don't be overly humble. Right? I looked it up, because why not definition? The definition of humble says having modest or low estimate of one's own importance. And I don't mind having a modest estimate of our own importance. I think that's important from what I just talked about, in terms of, in many ways, we aren't massively relevant to the overall grand scheme of life. But there are moments and there are areas in our lives that we are incredibly important to someone, to something. And I think it's important that, for the sake of our own mental sanity and our own courage, that we allow ourselves to also enjoy our victories, and that we know what we're worth, with the knowledge that we should always be striving to be better. So that's all I have on balancing out humility and arrogance. I hope that helps. Love to see your comments. And if you do have anything that you would like to hear me riff on, please put it in the comments or shoot me a message. And if you think that this is not helpful, let me know too. Thanks so much. I hope you guys are having a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.